Welcome to This Week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Rusel Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about risk, especially in the context of insurance. So we talk a lot about managing risk by your actions and not doing certain things, doing certain things. And insurance is really a main, factor into that as well, and how to manage your risk. So what are some things that people should keep in mind when it comes to their insurance, Russell?
Yeah, well, as a starting point, I think it makes sense to do an overall risk assessment. And we spend a lot of time, as you mentioned, talking about different strategies in the context of various types of business risk, particularly with respect to employees. But obviously, that's not the only risk that a business faces. And I think it's important to know kind of what the biggest risks are. It's just like if you're doing marketing, you're doing a SWOT analysis, you know your weaknesses, you know your threats. For operating a business, know your weaknesses, know your threats, know where you're vulnerable, and then start developing strategies to address those vulnerabilities. And so from my standpoint, I think there's a lot of practices and policies and management techniques that can fill and mitigate some of those risks and business decisions. But as you mentioned, insurance is can be a backstop to all those proactive things that you do. So when you get to talking about insurance, I think the first threshold question is, what insurance do I need? What risk do I need covered? Do I have the right policies in place to cover those risks? And is it in the right amount? Do I have the right amount of coverage for the risks that I'm dealing with?
Yeah, and it's always good to know that up front before something happens. So you don't want to have something happen and then realize that you're not covered. I think this is an easier concept for people to often be thinking about as it relates to your personal life, right? You've got your house. You don't want to try to realize you don't have homeowners insurance or, a homeowner's policy and your house burns down. Most of the time, if you have a mortgage, the mortgage company stops you from doing that. But on a business side, there's a lot more options. There's a lot more to think about depending on what type of business you have, how many employees you have, and doing that cost benefit analysis. So you really want to know that you've got these good policies in place before something happens. And then when something happens, that way you'll also know to think, oh, actually, insurance might cover this. I should probably write to my insurance company, find out, notify them of the claim, those types of things. So there's the front end of it, which is like, let's do an assessment, make sure I've got the policy. And then there's making sure that you know what you've got so that you can use it. So sometimes I've had clients where they have coverage for something and they didn't really realize it. I had someone once who had coverage for defamation claims and they didn't know that initially. And then we started asking the questions and, oh, well, actually I have coverage for that, for defense costs. And so needed to notify their insurance company. So it's just good to know what you have also when something does happen so that you know to report it, you don't waive coverage, and you actually reach out and use it and, reap that benefit of what you paid into the insurance policy when something does happen.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on the next step in that process is when claims do arise, or potential claims do arise, are you notifying the carrier right away? Are you following the right procedures for getting claims covered? And there's if you actually looked at any one of your insurance contracts, like there's a whole bunch of rules for the procedures of working with an insurance company when it comes to claims. And so it's important that you know what you're doing, which the most basic starting point for that is turning claims in promptly and putting the carrier on notice and making sure that they know and they have the ability to be involved in any potential remediation that might be taking place. So, I think that's another just extension of that. And again, at a high level for a business owner, I think it's just about understanding your risk, having the right tools in place, insurance being one of them, and then knowing when to use what tool at the right time, how to use it, and making sure that, particularly with insurance, that you have a plan in place and it's operational, tactical. There's an issue, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and then if you make a claim and the insurance company denies the claim, there is recourse to that as well. Sometimes they'll deny it, but if you actually dig into your policy, I know that's something we help with clients with as well, digging into the policy and actually seeing if that denial is proper? Did you give them enough information? So that would probably be the final step too. Hopefully they don't deny your claim, but don't always have to take that at face value either. And it's contractual, just like anything else. So that's something we also explore often for our clients. Well, thanks, Russell, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.